Taking you back to 1994, to the first government, you were a minister. Can you remember, what was it like?
It was extraordinary. I mean, we walk into this building that, for us, represented the epitome of the brutality of apartheid. You know, that's the Union buildings. And I have an office in the presidency as the Minister of Reconstruction and Development. So you're walking up the stairway and you're just thinking, my God, we are now in charge. What are we going to do with this country? And I walk into my office and it's completely bare because that doesn't even have a kettle. So I sort of was astounded, shocked, and anxious about what is it that we would deliver that will heal the land and also heal the wounds of apartheid.
There are a lot of emotions. What would have been the overriding emotion? Was there fear?
No, I think we were more obsessed about what do we do with power. We had fought for power for so long, and it's suddenly we were in charge. And so I think that was the sort of glue that held us together in spite of the obstacles we saw ahead of us. But we were naive. We had gone into power, ex-trade unionists and prisoners and people who had been freedom fighters, and suddenly we had in charge of the organs of state.
How do you think Mr. Mandela felt? He was in charge of it all. He was the number one guy.
I think he's had 27 years to plan this, so it's like destiny has finally delivered him the crown to do what he had fought so long for. But I think there was a sense that we weren't yet through the final barricades. We had stitched together a fragile coalition. We had a government of national unity. We had diffuse some of the more threats of the more extreme right wing, but we were still close to the edge, and there was a sense of purpose in that. And he spent a lot of time that a lot of people do not understand, patching together and stitching together the durability of the democracy we had just inaugurated. And so he swung straight into action, but he maintained this enormous sense of humor. That he made our work seem lighter. He made us feel that we had a shared humanity that we were there to deliver.
When you look back at that time, is there any one moment that stands out?
We had launched this campaign in the outskirts of Cape Town, in one of the townships, and I had gone to the launch with my wife and my child, who was then Cammy, my son, who was 2 years old. Terrible twos. And there he was. Mandela is making the speech, and he just kept running to the stage. And like 2 or 3 times, and like I went, and then my wife went, and then it's like embarrassing, about this. But he had this great sense of humor. So he stops his speech, and he says, I think this young man wants to make my speech for me, and takes him in his 2 hands, puts him on the pedestal, and continues making the speech while my son is looking at him. This sense of humility, of empathy, is something that you don't find in many political leaders. The sense that they can encounter something that is out of the norm, that isn't written in the books of protocol, but still be a human being before being a president. And I think that's what characterizes Mandela. He was a human being before he was the president.
In many of the speeches you give today, you still quote Nelson Mandela. One I read most recently said, "Never, never and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another and suffer the indignity of being the skunk of the world." Do you remember him saying that? Or is it something you read and you're retelling?
No. I mean, that was his inauguration speech. We were all there. We were holding our flags up high. We were proud as a people. And he said what we all felt, that never, never, never again will we have in this beautiful land of us the scourge of oppression, of exploitation by another. And so, yes, I remember that. It was a sense of pride that when he became the president. And so, yes, that's what continues to drive my energy and my activity. I am now gone back full-time to pursuing the ideas that Mandela stood for, not just in South Africa, but a lot in Africa, a lot around the world, because I now chair a global foundation dealing with malnutrition and hunger. And particularly stunting is the face of poverty. And what Mandela said about poverty is that this is man-made. We have created poverty. And because of that, we have the tools, if we have the political will, to change that trajectory. So those quotes, which are not quotations that are just sort of rhyme well, they are quotations that really embrace the deepest sense of justice, of fairness, of solidarity. And that's why I use them in my quotes. Not because Mandela was a saint. He wasn't a saint. He was a human being. He was an extraordinary human being, but a human being. And he made mistakes, just like we all make mistakes. But he had the sense and the propriety to understand the mistakes he made and to admit them.
2 decades on, the question everyone seems to ask now is, what went wrong? Why is that the question?
Because things have gone wrong. Not everything has gone wrong, because no one wants to go back to the violence and the brutality of apartheid, and that remains a political miracle. We're still a functioning democracy where people can criticize those in government without being thrown into jail, where people can go into the streets and protest, where people have got access to electricity and water and education and health. The question we're asking ourselves today, we could have been so much further down the road in building a sense of a nation in which the human potential of every single citizen has been achieved. Why haven't we done that?
Nelson Mandela is a very storied man in South Africa today, but as someone who knew him personally, how will you remember him?
How can I remember him? I remember what he stood for. And that's what I do in my life today. There's people like him, like Steve Biko, like my mother, who was a housewife, who taught me my values. These were real human beings. And they made me feel a sense of my shared humanity with other human beings and to take a stand against injustice. How would I feel? I'd feel incredibly sad. I'll feel, wrought with an emotion. I'd be angry that we haven't done enough to justify the legacy that he left us. I travel around the world. I spend all my time in villages and townships and slums, talking about hunger and malnutrition. That's how I will remember him, by rededicating myself to that sense of purpose he gave us, that inequality, injustice, oppression, the denial of rights to women, are an abuse of human rights. And if we are really human beings, we are part of a human race, we will continue to dedicate our lives to eradicate that scourge.